Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we are diving into one of the most critical turning points in the ongoing war. The collapse at Pokrovsk. What happened here shocked Ukraine, surprised NATO, and gave Russia one of its biggest battlefield victories in months. The fall of these positions didn't just happen overnight. It was a slow, grinding battle where Ukrainian troops held on until they simply couldn't anymore. When the Russian advance tightened around the last defensive line, the soldiers faced a brutal choice fight to the end or surrender to survive. What came next reshaped the entire front. The story of Pokrovsk is not just about losing another town. It's about a defensive network collapsing under pressure no one expected would come this fast. Ukrainian commanders believed the defenses around Pokrovsk were secure. They said reinforcements were coming. They said the supply lines would hold. But what unfolded was the complete opposite. Russian forces didn't just break through. They wrapped around and encircled the entire area, turning it into a deadly cauldron. For the soldiers inside, every hour became a fight to stay alive. When the encirclement was confirmed, Ukrainian troops tried desperately to escape. Some attempted small breakout missions at night, hoping to slip past Russian drones and artillery. Others dug in, trying to hold a shrinking perimeter. But the pressure mounted from every direction. Russian artillery hit trenches non-stop. Drones monitored every movement. And reinforcements that were promised never made it. Soon the soldiers realized they were alone, cut off and running out of ammunition. Their radios filled with messages of panic, pleas for extraction, and warnings that positions were collapsing one by one. Inside the cauldron, the situation grew more desperate. Units that once held strong defensive lines were forced back into cramped shelters. Medical supplies were gone. Food and water were running dangerously low. Some soldiers hadn't slept for days. Every explosion shook the ground, and every drone buzzing overhead carried the possibility of death. Fear, exhaustion, and hopelessness spread through the trenches. Many Ukrainian fighters described feeling abandoned, left in a trap while higher command denied the severity of the situation. When Russian units moved in from the northwest, everything broke. They pushed through the last defense line with overwhelming firepower. Ukrainian soldiers who were outnumbered and outgunned had no chance to regroup. The final clashes were chaotic and brutal. Some Ukrainian units attempted one last counterattack, but without artillery support or armor, it collapsed instantly. Russian troops advanced street by street, trench by trench, until the remaining Ukrainian fighters were completely surrounded with no escape routes left. As the Russian encirclement tightened, Ukrainian soldiers started laying down their weapons. Groups of troops emerged from destroyed buildings and deep trenches with their hands raised. The surrender wasn't sudden. It happened in waves as soldiers realized resisting was now suicidal. Videos later appeared showing dozens of troops walking out one after another, exhausted, dirty, and devastated. Many soldiers said they had been holding out for evacuation orders that never came. Instead, they remained trapped until surrendering became the only way to stay alive. The fall of Pokrovsk shocked Ukraine's civilian population. Families of soldiers desperately searched for information, trying to understand whether their loved ones were alive or captured. Social media filled with emotional posts, some blaming officials for not reinforcing the area, while others insisted the soldiers were heroes who held the line far longer than expected. In Kiev, military analysts warned that losing Pokrovsk could open a dangerous new path for Russian forces deeper into Donetsk region, creating more pressure on nearby cities and villages. In the West, NATO officials attempted to downplay the loss. They said the situation was fluid and that support for Ukraine would continue. But behind closed doors, the fall of Pokrovsk raised serious concerns. If a heavily defended position could fall this quickly, what did it say about the state of Ukraine's frontline manpower? What did it reveal about the effectiveness of NATO training and weapons? And most importantly, could Ukraine prevent more collapses in other critical areas? These questions echoed across European capitals as analysts scrambled to evaluate the implications. Russian media celebrated the victory loudly, calling it a turning point in the conflict. They showed footage of captured equipment, surrendered soldiers, and burning Ukrainian bunkers. The message was clear: Russia was advancing, gaining momentum, and breaking through the biggest Ukrainian defenses left in the region. Whether these claims were exaggerated or not, the truth was undeniable. Pokrovsk had fallen, and the battlefield map had changed dramatically. The situation inside the cauldron before the surrender was worse than most people realized. Ukrainian artillery was nearly silent because their ammo was depleted. Drones malfunctioned or were shot down. Vehicles ran out of fuel. Some soldiers said they hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days. The wounded were lying on cold ground waiting for help that never arrived. Communications were partially jammed, making coordination chaotic. The morale collapsed not because the soldiers were weak, but because everything around them was failing at the same time. One Ukrainian survivor described hearing Russian loudspeakers calling on them to surrender, promising medical help and safety under Geneva Convention rules. At first they ignored it, but when shells continued falling and no orders came from command, more troops began to consider laying down arms. Another soldier said he held on to hope until the last hour, but once he saw his unit reduced to just a handful of fighters, he realized staying meant death. Their decision wasn't betrayal, it was survival. The psychological impact of being encircled is devastating. Soldiers lose the sense of direction, hope, and purpose. Knowing there is no escape and no reinforcement breaks even the strongest fighters. This is what happened in Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian troops fought with determination, but were overwhelmed by a superior strategic position and non-stop bombardment. Encirclement battles throughout history, from Stalingrad to Debaltseve, have shown similar patterns, and Pokrovsk became another tragic example. As the surrender unfolded, Russian soldiers were seen escorting groups of Ukrainian fighters to temporary holding areas. Many captives looked exhausted rather than fearful. Some were limping, some had makeshift bandages, some were shivering from cold and stress. These images fueled debates across Ukraine and NATO countries about whether these troops should have been withdrawn earlier. Critics argued that Ukrainian high command should have ordered a retreat long before the encirclement, potentially saving hundreds of soldiers from capture. The aftermath of Pokrovsk is still unfolding. Russia is now repositioning forces to exploit the newly opened corridor. Ukraine is scrambling to form new defensive lines, but shortages in manpower and ammunition make the task difficult. NATO countries are rushing to approve more aid packages, but political divisions in Europe and the U.S. are slowing down deliveries. Analysts warn that without rapid reinforcement, more Ukrainian positions may face similar collapses in the coming months. Ukraine's leadership is also facing rising internal pressure. Families of captured soldiers are demanding answers. Veterans are speaking out, saying the front lines are severely undermanned. Some politicians are questioning why so many troops were left in a vulnerable position with no backup. These debates are creating tension at a time when national unity is more important than ever. The story of Pokrovsk is not just about a military loss. It is about the human cost of war. The soldiers who fought there were ordinary men pushed into extraordinary circumstances. They didn't give up easily. They fought through hunger, exhaustion, fear, and overwhelming firepower. Their final surrender wasn't a sign of weakness, but a reflection of the impossible situation they were trapped in. For Russia, the capture of Pokrovsk gives a strong strategic advantage. It boosts morale among its troops and demonstrates its ability to orchestrate complex encirclement operations. It also sends a message to Ukraine and NATO that Russian momentum is far from over. With new lines opening up, Russia may attempt to push further west, targeting additional Ukrainian strongholds. For Ukraine, the loss forces a reevaluation of strategy. New defensive lines must be built. Troop rotations must be improved. Logistics must be reorganized. And most importantly, political leaders must rebuild trust with soldiers and civilians who feel betrayed by the handling of the Pokrovsk situation. This setback is severe, but not final. Wars shift constantly, and both sides will continue adapting. For the world, Pokrovsk is another reminder of how brutal and unpredictable modern warfare has become. Drone warfare, artillery saturation, and electronic warfare have changed the battlefield completely. Supply lines are more vulnerable than ever. Morale collapses faster under digital surveillance and non-stop bombardment. Nations watching this conflict are learning hard lessons that will shape future military planning. As we continue to follow the developments after the fall of Pokrovsk, the key question now is whether this defeat will trigger a chain reaction. Will nearby positions also fall? Will Ukraine be able to stabilize the front? Will NATO accelerate support, or will delays worsen the situation? Every decision in the coming weeks will influence the next chapter of the war. Thank you for watching and staying with the channel as we break down critical developments like this. The fall of Pokrovsk may mark one of the biggest shifts in this conflict so far, and we will keep analyzing every update, every movement, and every consequence that follows. Stay tuned as we continue covering the rise and fall of positions across the front lines and the evolving strategies that shape this war.